So next we'll talk about the blockchain. So what is a blockchain? A blockchain in general is like a database, but the difference is these records are immutable in that they can't be erased and can't be necessarily accessed to change by anyone. It has a lot of benefits and more importantly, has an immutable track record, an immutable profile, so that as long as you associated with this profile or these things, you can trace every step along the way. The blockchain kind of gives you more security because it's its own protocol, where what we call smart contracts, which are basically small pieces of code, small programs, they just execute everything in the background. So if you can imagine, there are a set of parameters that are specified, and when something happens or something meets those parameters, then the code is executed. And so the state of that code is accessed by anyone because the Ethereum blockchain is a public permissionless blockchain. And that allows anyone to use a viewer to see every transaction and the amount that's transferred. And so the more clear explanation is if you think of it as like a way to run an escrow service without humans in the middle. So if you think of the way a bank or an intermediary holds funds, those funds in general would be able to be used for whatever during the interim period of time that they're being held. The difference with a blockchain is that they won't be able to move those funds. And so if you think about it, it kind of excludes the double spending of money problem that we've had. And so that'll introduce a lot of change in kind of the financial world. So more specifically, when you think about an app or a platform, the blockchain can be used to transfer data in the background so that there doesn't have to be a public interface to make every change that needs to happen. So if you think about it, all kinds of things like likes, rewards, follows, views, they all can be sort of tokenized with this layer of tokenization, right? So it's kind of a way to allow things that should happen based on pre-existing agreements to happen without there needing to be an intermediary. So that's probably the best way to explain it. And so another use case would be a situation where a user interacts with an application. They don't necessarily have to expose their data because in the background, this blockchain, which encrypts each piece, can keep their data from being exposed to an intermediary. Now, intermediaries can be good in some cases, but in some cases, intermediaries are also hackers, also malicious programs and spyware. And so it kind of shields you away from that stuff. So if you think of BAT, which uses the Brave browser. So that browser uses a blockchain, and because the blockchain is incorporated, the user's data is not necessarily broadcast and shared between all these malicious programs. So pretty cool stuff. So that's the introduction of blockchain. Important to note for our case, the blockchain is what we build our tokens upon. And our tokens are the ERC Ethereum standard. And we'll go deeper in depth with that. But this video is basically an introduction to the blockchain and its uses for our purpose. So a little bit more about the blockchain. The best way to describe what it is sort of a series of blocks of transactions that are linked together on the network. Each block has an index or nonce and some type of number. It has a reference to the previous hash and the data of that block. And so each block knows what came before, and that's how they're linked together and they verify each other. Critical data on the network has a hash signature that is used to anonymize the data. So that way everything is private, but also verifiable and virtually destructible on demand. This makes it hard for someone to act maliciously, also makes it harder for them to do deceptive things like buying fake profiles, fake followers and things like that. Hard to forge data, things like that. In a normal situation, we have a centralized platform, a centralized creator, and someone who controls the platform through centralized base. So central database, things go there. While we're so used to that, it's not necessarily safe because someone can go in and either send a malicious program or delete records, change records, falsify records, and we have no way of really knowing who actually did it. So the blockchain kind of introduces the idea of not having to trust. So it's kind of a backwards way of thinking about it. But if you take a step back and think, it takes away trust, and that's a good thing. So it takes away you having to worry about trust, because in a normal scenario, we have to think, do we trust the people running this operation, right? Because we're trusting them with their data, with our data. And in this case, it's only hashes moving around, so they don't actually have access to the data. And so that adds a layer of security. The blockchain kind of allows you to have more expert control over things, but yet it's immutable. So there's less forgiving for mistakes, So going forward, this will be a big challenge for advertisers and all the businesses that operate in between that are used to intercepting data, using data, and pushing products and ideas towards people, because everyone in the middle will be affected more so than everyone on the end, because they won't be able to push fake data so much. So we're entering a very interesting space, and it's important that you kind of understand what the blockchain is so that you can kind of create a product that kind of digs in and gets value from attaching to the blockchain, because there are so many different ways in which we can all benefit and create better and more innovative products. But we have to understand what it's doing first. So that's a little bit more about blockchain.